Hello, and welcome to the Freight Flow Advisor Brief, the show where we unpack the moves that actually change freight markets, not just the headlines. Today, we're talking about one of the most important stories in heavy freight this year, and it's not an earnings call or a merger. This story is about a port, a short line, and a project cargo joint venture quietly rewiring how we move the biggest, heaviest, most schedule-sensitive equipment in the economy. We're talking about power transformers and industrial generators. Today's episode is about Port of New Orleans, the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad, UTC Transoceanic, AI, digital twins. Now, these are all functioning in one stack to move some of the largest project cargo out there. So listen, if you touch project cargo, energy, rail, or even data centers, this story is a real signal, not noise. Now, I want to set the stage. If you've been paying attention the last few years, everyone's talking about AI. In fact, it's really been an AI boom, but most discussion is centered around GPUs and servers. While there are several constraints around chips, the biggest constraint is around power. And now behind power is hardware. It's steel, it's copper, it's 300-ton transformers that have to cross an aging power grid and an even older rail network. Since 2019, demand for generator step-up units has jumped roughly 274%, and substation power transformers are up more than 110%. In fact, lead times for the largest transformers have blown out from months to up to 4 years in extreme cases, with an average of around 120 weeks, even for standard large power transformers. At the same time, U.S. data center power demand is on track to more than double, from about 31 gigawatts in 2025 to around 66 gigawatts by 2027. This is according to Goldman Sachs. They estimate data centers will jump from roughly 4 to 8% of U.S. electricity demand in just a few short years. This is an enormous amount of steel, copper, and oversized equipment that has to move logistically. But here's the catch that I don't think anyone saw coming. 80% of U.S. power transformer supply is imported. That means ports and railroads, not just utilities, are now on the critical path for getting AI capacity online. In other words, if you control the gate where heavy industrial freight lands and hits rail, you're not just the link in the chain anymore, you're actually a strategic choke point. That's why what Port of New Orleans, NOPB, and UTC Transoceanic just did matters. All three have partnered with one specific mission, and that's to modernize how oversized industrial freight is routed across rail. Take a listen to this clip.
UTC holds a U.S. patent on an AI system that predicts rail clearance constraints for oversized cargo. Powered by Palantir Foundry, it replaces static drawings and weeks of coordination with a predictive, data-driven workflow, evaluating load, railcar, route, and historical outcomes before anything is submitted. What the UTC platform adds is the intelligence layer that makes that connectivity commercially visible before equipment is purchased, manufactured, or shipped. From the dashboard, we define the route, load, and railcar, and the patented workflow begins.
At the center of this partnership is a new AI-powered application called TEID RDC. This isn't a buzzword front end. It's a customer-facing tool where shipper or forwarder can punch in cargo dimensions, weight, rail car type, and they can get real-time routing feasibility across the NOPB network, which happens to connect to most major Class 1 railroads. Behind that screen is real innovation. A digital twin of NOPB rail network built on Palantir Foundry. It models bridge ratings, clearance profiles, track geometry, and infrastructure constraints. UTC actually holds a U.S. patent on AI rail clearance system for oversized cargoes. This is not a consulting engagement. It's a defensible piece of tech. Port officials have been straightforward about the current pain point. Historically, routing a 300-ton transformer could mean weeks or months of engineering studies, back and forth with multiple railroads and static drawings before anyone could even answer the basic question of, can this move? Beth Branch is the president and CEO of Port of New Orleans and NOPB. She summed it up like this. Planning one of these moves usually involves weeks of studies before a customer knows whether a route is even possible. This new platform brings that answer immediately. And you also have to remember where this is happening. Port of New Orleans is currently the only U.S. port with direct access to all 6 Class 1 railroads. That kind of connectivity plus a live digital twin is a very different competitive position. This bundle is basically turning New Orleans into a smart gateway for heavy industrial freight. So let's talk about what this really means if you're a carrier, a broker, forwarder, or operator. If you run Project Cargo today, you know the friction. A shipper can send you specs on a monster transformer, and the first thing you have to do is think about, is this even possible? Now, that's a lot of work coordinating with multiple entities, and the answer still may be no after weeks. So in a market where transformer lead times are already measured in years, losing 3 to 6 weeks just to figure out a route seems kind of insane. So now imagine a world where you can sit with a data center developer or a utility and say, just give me your dimensions, weight, and rail car, and I'll give you an answer back in a few hours. That's what New Orleans is doing here. That isn't just a better customer experience, that's real pricing power. That's the difference between being the forwarder of record on a billion-dollar program or watching the business go to whoever can give an answer faster. And here's my opinionated take. We're watching the gap widen between operators who treat routing intelligence as a strategic asset, while some still treat it like a manual back office function. The former are going to make more money and hold better accounts. The latter, you're on the clock. Norfolk Southern is already talking publicly about this trend. In fact, in late 2025, they highlighted that shipments of transformers and related grid equipment were up roughly 30% year over year. As their industrial products leadership put it, AI is accelerating power demand, and rail is essential to moving the heavy equipment that keeps the grid strong. That's a very clear signal. Heavy industrial rail is not a niche side business. It's one of the few structurally growing segments in an otherwise choppy freight market. I want to take a pause here to talk about freightfa.com. Freightfa.com is where you can find our AI freight chat assistant, the Freight Flow Advisor. Because if you're listening to this, you're probably the one getting the 9 p.m. text from a sales rep or an executive that says, can we even cover this lane? What's the rate? And is the capacity going to blow up next month? Freight Flow Advisor is built exactly for this moment. Think of it as a freight native chat assistant that sits on top of actual market data and gives you fast, defensible answers. You can look at lane level rate estimates for LTL, FTL, intermodal, and rail. You can look at current and forward-looking capacity risk. Historical trends can actually paste into an email or an RFP deck, and it gives you all the context you need to not get blindsided in a pricing call. So instead of burning 20 minutes hunting through DAT screenshots, stale PDFs, and 3 different dashboards, you drop the question into Freight Flow Advisor chat and get a market-backed answer in seconds. Our whole model is built on predictable, low-friction access. You're not signing up for some giant TMS replacement. You're paying a simple subscription to arm your team with an always-on freight analyst. You can start with a single seat to pressure test it, and sign up is free. Listen, if your team is quoting lanes that look anything like what we're talking about today, where it's oversized, long haul, energy adjacent, this is the kind of tool that keeps you from flying blind. You can try Freight Flow Advisor inside the broader Freight FA platform at freightfa.com. Again, that's freightfa.com. All right, as we turn our attention back to New Orleans, let's zoom out, because by 2027, U.S. data centers could be consuming close to 9% of national electricity output. The Department of Energy is flagging that data centers alone could eventually hit that 9% mark of total generation. Deloitte has even modeled scenarios where AI-driven data centers will hit loads of triple digits by 2035. So on the equipment side, Wood Mackenzie and other analysts are pretty clear. The transformer market remains structurally short, with an estimated 30% deficit on power transformers and persistent delays on breakers and high voltage cable. Grid equipment lead time of 2 to 4 years are the normal timelines, not an anomaly. Now, when you add on top of that routing a single transformer requires multi-rail coordination, many routes have marginal clearance or bridge constraints. Weather and climate risks are increasing along the Gulf and inland river systems. When Bloomberg and others say 30 to 50% of planned 2026 data center capacity is at risk due to transformer and grid constraints, part of what they're really saying is this, quote, we don't know if the equipment will be built. And even if it's built, we're not entirely sure how efficiently we can move it. That is what makes this Port of New Orleans deployment so interesting. It's actually one of the first serious attempts to remove logistics uncertainty from the critical path. So I'd frame it this way: manufacturing capacity and trade policy are big, slow levers. Routing intelligence is a lever you can actually pull right now. You can't build a transformer factory in 6 months, but you can take a routing decision that used to take 6 weeks and collapse it into a same day answer. That's exactly what the NOPB digital twin is designed to do. So, who stands to win from this and who's under pressure? Let's talk about the winners first. Port of New Orleans and the NOPB have turned themselves into a real moat by layering AI on top of their 6 Class 1 rail connections. It gives them a concrete answer to why should we route our project cargo through you instead of another Gulf port. Heavy haul rail and project cargo forwarders who lean in, if you plug into this platform and use it as a part of your pre-sale process, you look more credible, you can quote faster, and you can build better commitments with both shippers and rail partners. Data center developers and utilities who understand the freight side, the earlier you know which corridors are open, the earlier you can lock in contracts, permits, and outage plans. Now let's talk about who's under pressure. Competing Gulf ports and non-digitized gateways. If your route planning process is still based on static drawings, phone calls, and 6-week engineering review, you're in some serious trouble here. As more gateways roll out digital twins and AI clearance tools, saying things like "we'll let you know next month" stops being an acceptable answer. Old school brokers who treat project cargo like a one-off art form instead of a data problem, there will always be nuance, but the standardized routing intelligence is going to compress the premium you can charge for "I know a guy who knows a guy." Anyone betting on a quick end to transformer constraints? That latest work on Wood Mackenzie and others makes it pretty clear. This is a multi-year, maybe even decade-long adjustment, not a one-year spike. So to wrap this up, here's the bottom line. AI data centers and grid upgrades are the flashy headlines, but underneath is a very physical, very constrained heavy freight network. Ports and railroads that combine hard infrastructure with real digital intelligence are going to control more of the value in that chain. Credit is due to Port of New Orleans and NOPB because they moved early. They took a pain point and turned it into a near real-time decision. So if you're in freight, the question is pretty simple. Are you building your strategy around the way this network used to work or the way it's being wired to work next? If you want to go deeper, the full breakdown is on our Substack. And you can always get lane level rate and risk intel inside of Freight Flow Advisor at freightfa.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a colleague or logistic leader you know. You can follow us online at social media platforms at the Freight Flow Advisor on LinkedIn and Facebook. If you prefer to listen to our podcast, you can find us on Apple and Spotify. And lastly, you can watch us on YouTube. Now, no matter which platform you choose, make sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure to share. Until next time, this has been your Freight Flow Advisor Brief.